Hey guys, how are we doing? And welcome to another Insightful Session podcast. This is our fourth Insightful Session, and I today have the pleasure of being joined by Giorgio, who is the co-founder of Axelar and director of Axelar Foundation. So as always, Giorgio, I just want to say hello and welcome to the podcast. And before we do too much nicey stuff, let's just tell me a little bit about Axelar first, and then we'll go into your background. Let's start with a bit about Axelar.
Awesome. Thanks for having me and excited to talk to the community. I usually like when I talk about Axelar to have a quick presentation of our block explorer. So let me see if I can do that here. You should be able to record it. So what Axelar is an interoperability network that connects all chains and soon come into XRPL as well. Right? This is most easily understood through a visual. So what we're looking at here is the Axelar block explorer. In this diagram, in the middle, we see Axelar, which itself is a proof-of-stake blockchain with 75 validators. It's fully decentralized. And what you see on the circle around it is the networks that it connects. You can see up here that we have 69 networks, and soon, with the addition of XRPL and other networks, this number will keep growing. Now, what can you do with Axelar when you have connected all those networks? A few things. One simple use case to conceptualize is moving assets from one chain to another. Right? So if you're a holder of ETH on Ethereum mainnet and you want to move your ETH to another chain that doesn't have natively ETH, let's say Avalanche, you can do it through Axelar, create a representation of ETH so that the user of that new chain can get access to the asset, right? And that's something we're working on with the Ripple team to bring new assets to XRPL and to the XRPL EVM sidechain, right? So just very basic use case, but very powerful for the ecosystem. Axelar will be able to onboard all kinds of new assets over to the ecosystem. And when I talk about Axelar and bridging, what always comes to mind is security.
Mm-hmm.
There have been so many hacks in the past few years on the interoperability side, especially when you're creating bridge representations of assets with many billions of dollars lost. And the most common attack vector there is centralization. Many of the other existing solutions for interoperability, they use centralized validator sets or are fully custodial. Typically a founder holds the secret key to the funds. You set the funds to the founder. They mint you a representation of the asset on another chain.
Mm-hmm.
And when that founder's keys inevitably get compromised at some point, a lot of money gets lost, right? Again, in total, billions of dollars over many different hacks. It's not a one-off incident in the DeFi space. So with Axelar, the main differentiator from everyone else in the space is the fully decentralized validator set that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Axelar has 75 validators. Everything is open, right? It's an open system. You can see the validators. You can even join as a validator, right? There is a process for that. These are the biggest validators in the space. So from day one, our vision was that we want to make sure Axelar is as decentralized as any of the other networks it connects, so that attacking Axelar should be as hard as attacking the chains themselves, right? In other words, you can get similar security when you're going through Axelar than when you get on the chain themselves, which is very powerful, right? So decentralization, security by decentralization is a core principle of how Axelar was built. And I'm looking forward to bringing this level of security and decentralization to the XRPL relatively soon.
Wow, what an intro, and that's a beautiful aesthetic, by the way. And it's connected some pictures in my head. I hadn't seen that network graph before, so I think it's great that we've started that way. And something about you that I would like to dive into and is your background. Something that was quite interesting to me is that I know you were previously at Algorand. Could you give me a bit of your background in general? Because I'm sure some of the viewers will be very interested in knowing about your past, especially when you're building something at this scale.
Absolutely. So yeah, maybe just to go back in my high school days when I started doing research. So my last 2 years of high school, I just got very passionate with mathematics. So I was literally studying 16 hours a day. I think probably that period of my life was the longest when I was doing a single thing for 16 hours a day. So I realized if you put in the work and the passion and the focus, you can get good at anything. Because frankly, I was not. I had some inclination in mathematics, but I wouldn't say I was that great back in the day. So studied by myself for 2 years. And there are these mathematical competitions that you can participate in high school all over the world. I ended up being the first Greek student to win a gold medal at the international
Wow.
competition. And as a next step from that, I got accepted into MIT, where I ended up meeting Silvio Micali, who you may know as the founder of Algorand. So initially, Algorand was a research idea out of MIT. It was actually my co-founder, Sergey, my co-founder at Axelar now, and Silvio were working on it for some time. Then I joined them, right? It was a three-person team. We're all focusing on how to build a better proof of stake network, more decentralized. Actually, there were no proof of stake networks at the time. It was all a concept, right? Talking about 2016 at this point. And with Sergey, I think they were working on it from 2015. So how do we build a decentralized, fast, secure proof of stake network? We worked on that problem for a couple of years. My personal contribution there was the design of the consensus protocol of Algorand. Sergey also has done a lot of work on the infrastructure side in the space. I don't think that many people know, but Sergey is the one who led the standardization of BLS signatures. And the BLS signature scheme is what's used by Ethereum validators today to secure the Ethereum network through proof of stake, right? So we're both very technical in our roots, our DNA. Fast forward many years when we launched Algorand in late 2019, we recognized the need of interoperability, right? But me and Sergey, we always had a big belief that the ecosystem is going to be multi-chain. I think back then it wasn't so clear. There were not that many chains or as much demand for the technology. Today, we hear about new layer ones or layer twos popping up every week, right? And I mean, I think last week I heard about probably 5 of them, and that's the ones I know of. So it's pretty clear that it's going to be a world with many, many chains. And our thesis from day one was just simply that a lot of chains, we want to build something to connect Algorand to other ecosystems, but also to connect all ecosystems together. We didn't want to build anything specific to any ecosystem. At the time, Polkadot and Cosmos were building their own interoperability protocols that, great protocols, but worked in their ecosystem. So the question was always, how can we build something that scales to everything, different VMs, EVM, XRPL, Bitcoin, Solana, now the move chains and everything, right? And that was really the goal. And we've been building Axelar for 4.5 years at this point.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I actually contacted you to get you on here is because I didn't know too much about, well, a little bit about Algorand, but what I did know is, especially the word in the community was that the developers were really trying to build something very technical and that it was an amazing product. And then when I heard that you were one of the founders there, I was like, oh, this guy I need to speak to, because all of a sudden I've seen Axelar come out, and then all of a sudden I've seen that you were one of the co-founders at Algorand or whatever. I was like, I need to speak to this guy. And then obviously you very kindly came on the podcast. And this project you're building has just exploded out of nowhere. On my timeline, I feel like you. What did you say? Have you said 4 years you've been building? I genuinely have not heard of anything until maybe a month ago, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere. So, or 2 months ago maybe, when I first saw it mentioned, and then now every corner that I look down, it's probably the algorithm as well. But it's Axelar in my face all the time, and it seems fantastic. So, congratulations on what you built so far.
Thank
So.
you so much. Yeah, if you don't mind, just to add something important here, something very important, right? Interoperability is hard, and when we started building Axelar, we had the decision to make. Right? We could either go to market fast with a centralized solution and claim it's decentralized. That's what everyone was doing back in the day, right? REN protocol, if you remember, multi-chain, which actually lasted for a long time. They were claiming they're decentralized, and then the money just disappeared one day, and apparently the keys were held in the same place, right? So it's very easy to make claims about decentralization. it's very hard to actually spend 2 years just to even be able to build something and take something to market, right? So we're always mindful of that. And for the first 2 years of Axelar existence, we didn't even have any partners, right? Like we're just making sure it launches, it works well, and then the infrastructure will be in place to scale it and have a big advantage over the competition, right? And sometimes as a founder, this is hard because to do things right, like sacrifice a market opportunity, you have pressure from investors as well, right? It's not the easiest thing to do, but yeah, we started building way before people started hearing about Axelar. And just a small correction here on the algorithm side, it said founding team because we did a lot of the core work. It was literally like, these 3 people out of MIT, but officially like Silvio was the founder, right? Like it was not a co-founder in title at any point, just to be clear on that. But I did very, very core work and, happy to elaborate on that.
Yeah, and that's awesome, and like I wouldn't leave that there, but it was just because that caught my attention, and I didn't realize about what was going on there. But it's, as I can imagine, it must be a difficult toss up to either try and pursue something capital generating and go to market quickly, or just to make the product that you want to make. And so I respect the fact that you've really like chased the product that you envisioned and the thing that you were going for. And decentralization is obviously the key thing here, and also like not being able to be hacked in that sense is like, even if you go to market quickly, if you get hacked, your product's gone, and you've lost your customer base, and you've lost everything that you've been building. So like credit to you, because I can imagine the difficulty of that. But we mentioned Ripple a few times here so far, and obviously, as you know, I'm a big proponent of the XRPL. What do you actually do with Ripple? What's come in with the XRP Ledger and Axelar specifically?
Great question. So there's a few things. As you know, XRP is launching, the Ripple team is launching a sidechain to the XRPL, which will allow developers to effectively take all of the innovation from the EVM ecosystem and deploy it on a new chain that's specific to the Ripple ecosystem. A few different things that Axelar will enable people to do. First of all, just bridge XRP from the XRPL to the sidechain. Now, why is this important? A few reasons. Number one, the gas token on the sidechain is going to be the XRP bridged by Axelar, right? So Axelar needs to go live for the chain itself to go live and be usable. In that flow, Axelar may be invisible, so a lot of the people who actually bridge over and like transact on that chain, they won't know they're using Axelar. By the nature of the technology, interoperability is supposed to be an invisible technology with great user experience. So hopefully, no one will know they're using Axelar in a few years, but everyone will be using it. But that's something that Axelar will enable you to do, right? Just transact and like pay gas on the EVM sidechain. Of course, by bridging over XRP to the sidechain, but also to other EVM ecosystems, people will be able to put their XRP to productive use, right? And leverage potentially like, DeFi opportunities to earn some yield of their XRP, maybe even go and restake it, right? With some of these new projects like Symbiotic, Karak or Eigenlayer, right? And provide security to other networks and get paid for that, right? So there's so many interesting opportunities that are opened up for the XRP asset once you can bridge it, one to the XRPL EVM sidechain, but also to some of these other ecosystems, right? And it's one of the biggest assets in the space, right? And it's probably, if I have to think about it, like the biggest asset that doesn't have access to DeFi today. Because Bitcoin, you can do wrap Bitcoin and like use it in DeFi on Ethereum, right? Solana and Ethereum as well. XRP never had a DeFi layer, right? So I think this is going to be great for the people who have been like, just holding XRP for a long time and are looking for interesting things to do with it, right? So that's just a few of the things, but of course there's more.
Yeah, I mean that's super exciting. So from my understanding so far, just to clarify, like Axelar is basically like similar to like HTTPS on the website. You're like kind of like almost like a launcher or like a background like connector for all the different chains to be able to work together.
There are some similarities there, right? Yeah, it provides some like security properties, but it doesn't really require you to know you're using Axelar. Well, the analogy I think that's more appropriate is more like the internet, right? Where you use the internet, like you communicate with one computer and another. If you think about it, what is a blockchain, right? It's a computer. Some people call it a world computer, but it's a decentralized ledger, a decentralized computer. And if you want to like send messages or like send emails, in other words, from one blockchain to another, you need to have some internet technology underneath, right? And that's the equivalent that Axelar provides for Web3 infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree. And I always thought that the future would be multi-chain. I just never knew, like from a developer perspective, how that could work. So in my head, they were just like closed loops almost, and now you're like making that bridge, which is amazing. So talking about Axelar, what do you have coming up like next for Axelar specifically?
Well, the XRP connection is a big one, right? So, and this is part of a big product release that has been in the works for a long time. It's called the Mobius technology stack. What's nice about Axelar is because Axelar has a blockchain itself, and let me just go back to the graphic that we presented earlier in the discussion. Axelar itself has a blockchain, right? And the nice thing is that because it has a blockchain, one-off connections are created to other blockchains that want to be connected to the ecosystem. Right? So if you think about the Polygon connection and the Base connection and the Ripple connection, they're all going to be independent connections that plug into Axelar.
Mm-hmm.
And all those integrations in the past have happened in the consensus layer of Axelar. But now, what we can do, because we have a blockchain, is we can launch smart contracts on top of Axelar. Right? And this is really the big Mobius upgrade that has been in the works for a long time. By launching smart contracts on top of Axelar, this opens up so many possibilities, right? Because it makes Axelar a truly open interoperability network where anyone can program their own connection to the chain. So when someone builds a connection to like XRPL and Solana and Sui, all those connections are coming soon, you will be able to route messages through the Axelar hub to any other chain in the Axelar ecosystem. In other words, you get many-to-many connectivity, where one single point of integration for a chain gives you access to 69 chains today and hundreds or thousands of chains in the future, right? And this is going to be very easy to scale because Axelar is going to have smart contracts. It becomes a really open ecosystem, and this enables many different developer entities to build connection to Axelar, right? So you won't have to go through a path where you need effectively like consensus approval to be adding new chains. It's going to be fully permissionless, and anyone will be able to add their own chain to Axelar and scale the system infinitely.
Wow, this is it's blowing my mind a little bit. This is making me feel like well, I haven't got any exposure, so I just feel like I need to get some exposure, but I'm not going to talk about that too much. I'm just going to keep my personal thoughts about that to myself. But that actually leads me quite nicely onto this next question: is where do you see Axelar in like 5 years' time?
Well, it all depends where the ecosystem goes, right? The more scalable the ecosystem, the more chains,
Yeah.
the more Axelar will benefit. And Axelar, I think, is going to be relevant, I think, in two situations, right? One is like, yeah, there's many chains. Also, number two is a situation where there's many different VMs. And again, today, XRPL has its own VM. Solana has its own VM. Sui has its own VM. Aptos, even though it's also moved chain, it has its own VM. Cosmos, again, right? So there's many different implementations. And those can be connected very well by Axelar, precisely because we have this hub and spoke architecture, right? So you can use the hub to translate messages from one VM to another. This is also great for security, because if one chain breaks, then you can cut off the connection at that point. You can have rate limits specific to that connection. So from a damage contamination perspective, this can really prevent any contamination, right? And is the architecture that I strongly believe is the only right architecture. And you hear about a lot of projects that, like virtually everyone else, try to do things in a pairwise manner where you connect chains directly. Well, this is not going to scale, and this is not going to scale securely, right? So to me, it's more of a question not where Axelar is going to be, because with Axelar, it's going to do one thing and do it really well. It does one important job really, really well. And you have to be laser focused as an ecosystem, especially given how critical security is in this space. But as long as the space grows and there's more and more chains, Axelar will become more important to the ecosystem because people will want to move across different chains to use different interesting applications, and the only way you can do it is with interoperability technology, right? So my personal estimate has always been that something like 1 in 4 transactions are going to be cross-chain, because if you look at how people use Ethereum, on Ethereum, people typically are going to go to Uniswap, do a swap, then maybe you go buy an NFT, you go get a loan. Every fourth or so transaction is cross-application. And in a world where applications have their own block space, live on their own app chain, people will need to move. Every time they want to use an application, people will need to move across those chains. So you will need interoperability, right? So something like 25% or of all transactions is my expectation will be through interoperability technology in the next like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and I think that's very reasonable, and I can understand the thought process to that. So that's about all my personal questions, but we've actually got one from the community here, which is actually from I call him Crippler because I'm dyslexic, but he's actually not how you pronounce it at all. He'll know who it is because I'm going to tag him in the video. But actually, just before I ask this question, do you want to just move yourself back to non-presentation mode because your screen's freezing a little bit here? There we go. Cool. We're back. So we've got a question from the community. I call this guy Crippler, but he's not called Crippler. He's I think he's a dev on the XRPL. But he asked a question that he wanted to ask you a question. Sorry, let me get words out there. He said, please ask him about the latency aspect of communication between the interconnected chains and that needs to come to consensus. Like, how does this work? Is it solvable?
That's a great question. So I'll answer this in 2 parts, right? So there's what you need. There's the latency required to pass a message securely, and then there's what the user sees. And those 2 things may be a little bit different, right? So even though on some paths you may be a bit slow, the user can always receive their asset, their message immediately from their perspective, right? So 2 different notions. So starting with the first one, when you're passing a message from one chain to another, you want to ensure integrity of the message, especially when a lot of money is concerned, right? But again, you don't want to lose money. So if you're going from an Ethereum layer 2 to XRPL, well, Ethereum layer 2s are not the fastest, especially today. Look at some of the optimistic layer 2s. You need to wait for the state or for the sequencer to write the state on the layer 1 so that the state can later be disputed if something goes wrong. So by default, if you want to pass a message in a secure way, you probably need to wait 20 or 30 minutes, right, for the message delivery. And Axelar by default will wait for that on the layer 2s. That doesn't mean that the user also has to wait for that, because the vast majority of the use case for cross-chain is asset transfers. And for asset transfers, there's all kinds of protocols. People call them intent-based protocols, where effectively a relayer service can go and submit a transaction on your behalf on the destination chain. Like, let's say in the case of XRPL, you have some RLUSD on Ethereum you want to get on the XRPL. You can have a relayer service, which is effectively a market maker that submits a transaction on behalf of the user after it sees the initial confirmation on the origin chain. And then after the confirmation goes through from the slow path, the relayer is going to receive the funds on the origin chain. Right? So you can have situations where some off-chain services assume the risk on behalf of the user. They're going to take like a very small fee because realistically the risk is not particularly high. So the market makers are okay to take that risk. The user gets their RLUSD like from Ethereum to XRPL in like a few seconds, effectively, and the user doesn't assume any risk. Now, the reason we don't assume this risk in the Axelar protocol itself is that integrity is really important, right? So even if one message goes, even if one fake message is passed, this can have very wide systemic implications for the whole system, right? And of course, there are many levels of defense for that, but you don't want to have fake messages being passed, or I guess unconfirmed messages being passed on the infrastructure layer, right? Because then you need a way to recover, and there's a lot of implications that are just not great. But one level above, if a market maker wants to take the risk, they know that transaction may be reverted like once a year or something like that. It's totally okay, right? So that's effectively how I see the user experience playing out, where you have these entities that submit the messages right away for the user. And by the way, this is live in production, right? For Squid, which is the top application on top of Axelar for cross-chain swaps, you can swap from any chain to any chain in less than 20 seconds, right? Anyone can go and try it out, and it's very, very fast, right? So as far as the user is concerned, it's very fast, but from an infrastructure perspective, some chains are slower, so you have to wait for their finality, right? It doesn't make sense to take shortcuts on that front.
Yeah. So as far as I understand, then you're basically saying that you will find faster consensus for the user, but the actual settling could be later, but will probably be done by a market maker who's assuming like duration risk and charge you a slight fee, depending on the transactions, etc.
That's a perfect way to articulate this. Yes.
Okay. So, Georgios, we talked a little bit about Axelar. Could you let me know how Axelar is like basically helping onboard new users for each ecosystem for the XRPL, for example?
Absolutely. So just as a reminder, Axelar is an interoperability platform. On top of it, you can build applications like bridges, right, cross-chain lending, and other things. One of the most successful applications on top of Axelar is called Squid Router, which you can think of as a cross-chain decentralized exchange. Start from any of the 69 chains connected to Axelar with any asset, swap into any other asset on any other chain, right? So let's say you want to start with ETH on Ethereum, finish with XRP on the XRPL, so you can pay for gas on the ledger. That's something you can do through Squid. So here I have a quick demo of how Squid works. It works for both EVM and non-EVM chains. So as we said, all ecosystems, right, including XRPL. When that goes live, and here you go. So you start on the front end as a user, you pick origin chain, token. Here it's Osmo, it's a Cosmos chain, Cosmos token. Destination chain is Arbitrum with ETH. You connect your wallet on the origin chain. You may notice that there's different wallets, right? Kepler on the Cosmos side and MetaMask on the Ethereum side. And you can also use XRP specific wallets, right? When you're going to the XRP ecosystem. On the origin Cosmos chain, approve on your Kepler wallet. We wait a little bit. You see the timer here, close to the bottom, time to complete. You're seeing in real time the different steps because there's many underlying swaps happening, and that's it. The funds are in your wallet, your MetaMask wallet on Arbitrum, and the same flow coming very soon to XRPL.
Wow, that was like super fast as well. That UX is good. Like looked aesthetically very pleasing. It looks very easy to use, just like similar to Uniswap or other bridges you might have used in the past. But the speed's something that I'm definitely impressed with there. Like all those 5 different swaps, I think you showed there, and then it was settled in what was
Yeah,
that,
maybe
like
just
20
to go
seconds?
just to go back to that. 1 second. Yeah, so you can see as the video was progressing, you have multiple steps, right? And why is that? Because Squid taps into different pools on different chains, right? So on the Cosmos side, Osmo gets swapped to this asset called Axelar USDC, which is an Axelar bridge version of USDC. And then effectively this gets bridged over to the Ethereum ecosystem, gets swapped into native USDC, into wrapped ETH, and then unwrapped into native ETH on Arbitrum, right? So there's like 6, 7 different steps here, but all were abstracted away from the user, right? And this is just one complex cross-chain operation you can do with Axelar. You can also imagine taking a cross-chain loan where you collateralize an asset on an origin chain, getting an asset on a destination chain. But really, the potential here is limitless, right? As a user, you should be able to do fully sophisticated, right, Turing-complete cross-chain operations, and the user will only see their one-click experience, right? So this is the new paradigm of how applications are going to be built in the next few years.
Wow, I'm blown away. I'm actually blown away. It's just everything about that is like so exciting. I It feels like such a progression, but it also feels like something that we've definitely needed for so long. Um, but it's finally here. So I presume this is already launched. Obviously, as I don't know because I've not been using Axelar myself. Has this product launched? Obviously not for the XRP Ledger yet, but is it live on other chains, or are we still awaiting this?
Absolutely, yeah. It's been live for, I believe, about a year now. It's integrated into some of the biggest wallets like MetaMask, Trust Wallet. It's used also by non-EVM ecosystems, as we demoed here. It's very widely used in the Cosmos ecosystem, all of the chains there. And yeah, you can go and try it out. It's I guess I'll send you the link so you can put it under the video when this goes live. But yeah, people can already use it, and soon it's going to come to XRPL as well.
That's great. Thank you. That's everything that I've got for you. So actually, normally finish my podcast with one like easy sort of question for yourself personally. You are obviously quite an accomplished person, amazing achievements with mathematics from Greece, as you were saying, and then going to MIT. It's fantastic. Launching or being a part of the team that launched Algorand, and then obviously now Axelar, which is looking like it's going to be in the forefront of the crypto space in general. What advice could you give to somebody who's either thinking about starting their entrepreneurial journey, or personal advice that like has allowed you to get to where you are?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for the kind words. Honestly, it never stops. It never gets easier, right? Because you always have important problems to solve. Everything feels like it's important, right? So I'd say if you decide to go down this path and decide to launch a business, make sure you're in it for the long run, right? It's not something you do for 5 years and then you stop doing it. So you must make sure your heart is really in this. If there's just one advice, I'd just say get started. The hardest thing always is to get started and generate some momentum. I feel like there's something about the human brain where if you start overthinking, like you're gonna have doubts and you never get anything done, right? I think start, meet people, make sure you interact with people, find good mentors. That's particularly important. But get started, make a lot of mistakes, and that's the way you learn, right? In life, I feel like to improve, you just have to make a lot of mistakes. Right? You need to encounter resistance, because when you make a mistake, you're actually going to learn from it. If everything is going smoothly, probably you're not pushing a lot on the boundaries, right? So making mistakes, feeling like a beginner is a great thing, but it never gets easier. Right? I feel like a beginner all the time, right? And that's because I'm trying to learn new things. And the more I know, the more like a beginner I feel like, right? Because there's so much more I want to know. But having no ego and like just getting started and like be ready to face failure. This is the most important thing, right? And this is something you do for the rest of your life. I can't imagine going back and doing, let's say, a regular job at any point, right? So make sure you want it and just get started and make some mistakes and see what happens.
Definitely. And like I really resonated when you talked about your maths journey at the start, like basically saying that you didn't think you were that good at maths, but you just like worked on it really hard. I feel like that exact story you've just said there is just like getting started and just grinding through it. If you've got the like staying power, that's something I've learned in my journey as well. It's like you got that staying power, then all of a sudden you find yourself somewhere and you just keep taking that step forward. You go down that road it gets blocked, and you go down that one, and then when I speak to people like you who also say, who I look up to you in like a massive way, doing something like you're doing. I'm not intellectually blessed like that. I think it's very difficult. And if you say that you always feel like you're learning, it makes me feel much more secure in myself as well. So that's definitely something that could pass down to you, to me, and I definitely would love to pass that on to other people. So just don't worry about feeling stupid, I think, is the other part of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a great example, actually, the math competitions I was doing in high school. So I participated in those competitions 3 times, my last 3 years of high school. And they have multiple different rounds, right? There's the easy round where, it's like everyone can participate in the country, right? And there's like 3 more rounds, and then you go like to the international level. First time I did it, I actually couldn't pass the first round, right? So I wasn't even in the top, like, 20% out of the people who participated. And then I had to work so hard, right? Like I felt so lost for probably like first few months, but then you just keep going, right? And things start to make sense. Your brain makes connections. It feels so slow day by day, but every day you try to solve a problem, you learn something, and this accumulates. Compounding interest is real. It just works. That's how the human brain works. So you just have to persevere through the initial hurdles, and then I guess it does get a bit easier to persevere, but like there's more problems. So it's an interesting balance. But yeah, man, I feel like honestly, innate talent is part of it, but when it comes to intellectual pursuits, I feel like everyone can get in the top 1% of their field if they put their mind to it and work hard enough, right? So it's just about at this point how much you want it, right, and how you want to balance it with your other responsibilities.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and like I think we align very closely with that. So, just to wrap up, brother, how can anybody find yourself, and where can they find Axel? I'll obviously link this in the description below. But is there anything you want to just shout out to finish this off?
Honestly, if you're a developer, you'd like to work with Axelar or just learn more, feel free to reach out to me directly on Twitter. I'm quite active there, and I can direct you to the right people on the team or the right documentation. And yeah, would love to hear from you, especially if you're building on the XRPL or the sidechain. There's so much you can do by leveraging the Axelar infrastructure, right? So let's prepare for that ahead of the official launch.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming on and being my fourth podcast guest in my insightful sessions.
Thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to working more closely with you in the community.